Welcome, I'm Mandy Mioccia and you are watching A News. Let's have a look at the headlines. Tehran rejects claims of negotiations as Trump postpones attacks on Iranian infrastructure. Death toll in Colombian military plane crash climbs to 66. Cause still unknown. European Union and Australia seal long-awaited trade deal. Thank you for tuning in. The U.S. has announced a pause in strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure as Washington says talks with Tehran are underway. But questions remain over those claims as Iran denies any talks. A News' Ubay Shabander reports from Washington.
President Donald Trump on Monday announced that he has ordered a 5-day pause of all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure to give room for diplomatic negotiations that are ongoing between Tehran and Washington. On a posting on social media, Trump said that the United States and Iran are currently engaged in talks that will continue throughout the week. Special envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are leading the U.S. effort, and the talks are being reportedly facilitated by the governments of Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, according to reports here in Washington. An Israeli official told Axios that U.S. envoys Witkoff and Kushner had been in touch with the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Reports also indicate that the Trump administration may be considering Ghalibaf as a future leader of Iran that would be acceptable for the White House. This could mirror U.S. policy in Venezuela that left the government largely intact after the removal of Maduro by U.S. forces. The U.S. is continuing to move thousands of Marines and sailors to the Middle East, as well as a major airlift of a large number of U.S. Special Forces to U.S. bases in the region within striking distance of Iran. The Wall Street Journal on Monday also reported that American Gulf allies Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are reportedly nearing a point where they would publicly and directly join U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iranian military installations. In addition to the Marines, the Pentagon is also considering sending approximately 3,000 rapid response paratroopers from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne to support possible U.S. operations in Iran. These forces could be used to seize the strategic Karg Island and deprive Iran of its ability to export most of its oil. I'm Ubay Shabander, A News, Washington.
Meanwhile, Iran's parliament speaker and foreign ministry spokesman have categorically denied any talks with the United States. For more from Tehran, we go to our correspondent, Turaj Shiralilu.
Iranian officials, including Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai, refuted U.S. President Donald Trump's statement on negotiations between Tehran and Washington, branding it fake news. Their statements were made after Trump claimed on Monday that positive and constructive talks took place with Tehran over the last 2 days and backed down from its threat to strike Iran's energy infrastructure. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held phone talks with foreign ministers of Azerbaijan, Egypt, Pakistan, Russia, South Korea, Turkey, and Turkmenistan. According to official news media, quoting foreign ministry press releases, Iran's top diplomat discussed with his counterparts the latest developments in the war and the consequences of the U.S. and Israel's continued military aggression. In separate contacts with his Azerbaijani and Turkmen counterparts, Araghchi explained dimensions of the attacks on the provinces bordering the Caspian Sea and warned of their destructive environmental effects on the world's largest closed body of water. Also in the phone call with Turkish Foreign Minister, he said it was deplorable that the territory of Islamic countries is being misused to attack Iran. While Tehran maintains blocking the Strait of Hormuz on the 25th day of war, Iran's foreign minister told his South Korean counterpart that the strategic waterway is closed only to vessels from the countries involved in the conflict and their allies. Arafchi said that other countries' ships have no problem passing through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with the Iranian side. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting from downtown Tehran, Foreign News.
An arson attack targeting emergency vehicles serving a Jewish community in London has raised concern about a rise in anti-Semitic incidents across Europe. Investigators are now examining possible foreign links as security agencies respond to a broader pattern of threats against Jewish sites.
A police investigation is underway in London after 4 ambulances belonging to a Jewish charity were set on fire in what authorities are calling an anti-Semitic hate crime. The attack happened early Monday morning in Golders Green, a neighbourhood with a large Jewish community. The vehicles, operated by the volunteer emergency service Hatzolah, were badly damaged. Gas canisters inside the ambulances caused several explosions, shattering nearby windows. No injuries were reported. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said officers are exploring possible links to groups connected to the Iranian state. However, he stressed it is too early to confirm any direct involvement. Police believe 3 suspects were involved. No arrests have been made so far. The case is not being treated as terrorism. But counter-terrorism officers are leading the investigation due to their expertise. Across Europe, security has been tightened following a series of anti-Semitic incidents. In Belgium, troops have been deployed in major cities to guard Jewish sites, including synagogues and schools, after an explosion at a synagogue in Liège earlier this month. In neighbouring Netherlands, authorities reported an arson attack on a synagogue in Rotterdam and an explosion at a Jewish school in Amsterdam, with several young suspects already arrested. Meanwhile, in Norway, a bombing targeting the US embassy in Oslo has been classified as an act of terrorism, adding to wider concerns about escalating threats in the region.
Elsewhere in Europe, Danes are voting in an election with Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's Social Democrats aiming for a 3rd term. Frederiksen called the vote months earlier than expected after a standoff with US President Donald Trump or the future of Danish semi-autonomous territory of Greenland.
Denmark is heading to the polls for a general election on Tuesday, marked by Trump's annexation threats towards Greenland and domestic concerns. Voters will cast their ballots after Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the election, seeking to capitalize on a surge in support for her defiant stance against US pressure over Greenland. However, voters say domestic issues dominate their concerns, from the environment to immigration. Several noted that Greenland barely features in their decision-making, with most political parties broadly aligned in their support for the territory.
The environment is the most important, and also to have a stable government. So that's the 2 main things I'm voted for.
There's a lot of crisis in the world. Then we tend to focus on what's in our backyard. So I think that's why the drinking water is has been so focused in this election. And also the pigs and how they're the welfare for the animals. I think it's where you focus when there's so many things going on.
I'm hoping for more lenient immigrant policies, more focus on the environment, and making it cheaper for the ordinary person to buy housing in Copenhagen, in the major cities mainly.
Denmark's current government is an unusual cross-partisan coalition of Frederiksen's Social Democrats, the centre-right Liberal Party led by Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen, her main challenger, and the moderates led by Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, who has twice served as Prime Minister. About 4.3 million Danes are registered to vote.
The European Union has sealed a long-awaited trade deal with Australia. The deal, worth about $7 billion was signed in Canberra, with Australia's Prime Minister and the head of the European Commission describing it as a mutual win-win.
The European Union and Australia have signed a long-awaited free trade agreement aimed at boosting exports and strengthening economic resilience amid global trade uncertainty. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the deal is intended to reduce dependencies and expand reliable trade partnerships as global tensions rise.
Today, we are telling an important story to a world that is deeply changing. A world where great powers are using tariffs as a leverage and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. In our story, open, rules-based trade delivers positive sum outcomes. Trust matters more than transactions. It is a story of building strength at home and diversifying abroad through a reliable network of agreements that we respect and uphold.
The agreement will remove tariffs on more than 99% of EU goods exported to Australia, including industrial products and most agricultural goods. However, sensitive farm products will remain subject to quotas, while Australia's luxury car tax will largely stay in place, with some exemptions for electric vehicles. Negotiations lasted 8 years and involved complex discussions over agriculture, geographical indications and market access. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the deal represents a major boost for the national economy and will create new opportunities for exporters.
The Australia-European Free Trade Agreement will lower trade and investment barriers between Australia and the EU, a market of around 450 million people. This agreement is worth $10 billion to the Australian economy on an annual basis.
Beyond trade, the two sides also agreed to deepen cooperation on critical raw materials, such as lithium and aluminium, and to strengthen defence and security ties. The agreement is part of a broader push by Brussels to diversify its global partnerships as it faces increasing economic competition from the United States and China, alongside rising geopolitical uncertainty.
Japan has announced the biggest ever release of oil from its strategic reserves this week. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said the country braces for possible shortages caused by the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. In a governmental meeting, Takaichi said they released 15 days' worth of private sector oil inventories last week and added the country will tap a month's worth of crude from the state reserves starting Thursday. Japan imports more than 90% of its crude oil from the Middle East, making it particularly vulnerable to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. As the Middle East war continues, fuel pressures are beginning to show all over the world, with long queues at gas stations, factory shutdowns, and university closures. Countries across the globe are implementing measures to limit the price rise and cut consumption.
Countries across Asia and Europe are facing fuel shortages and rising energy costs as the ongoing conflict involving Iran continues to disrupt global supply routes. In India's Ahmedabad, long queues of scooters and cars formed outside petrol stations as anxious motorists rushed to refuel. While authorities insist there is no official shortage, reduced deliveries and panic buying have led to significant delays.
You can see the crowd here in Ahmedabad city. Nobody knows why this is happening. We have been stuck at the petrol pump for the past 1.5 to 2 hours. Men and women, everyone is stuck. We don't know why this is happening.
The crisis is also hitting industry. In Surat, a major textile hub, factories are struggling with gas shortages. Some have turned to firewood to keep operations running, while others have been forced to shut down due to their reliance on gas-powered systems.
Some boilers and machines are running on firewood, but there are some others that solely rely on gas. That's why factories are being forced to shut.
The disruptions are largely linked to blocked shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for global energy supplies. India, one of the world's largest energy importers, has been particularly affected, facing shortages of both fuel and cooking gas. In Beijing, motorists queued at fuel stations ahead of an expected price hike as authorities raised retail fuel caps in response to soaring global oil prices. Meanwhile, in Slovenia, the government has introduced limits on fuel purchases to curb hoarding and ease pressure on supplies. Drivers are now restricted to fixed daily amounts, while the army has been deployed to support fuel distribution. The impact is also being felt in the aviation sector, with airlines cutting flights and raising fares as fuel prices surge. Some carriers warn of billions of dollars in additional costs if high prices persist. The conflict, which began in late February, continues to ripple across global markets, raising concerns over energy security and the risk of prolonged disruption.
Turning to the war in Europe, Russia launched drones and missiles at Ukraine overnight on Tuesday, killing at least 3 people, damaging homes and sparking fires, Ukrainian officials have said. 1 person was killed and 5 injured in a strike on the Zaporizhia region, while 2 others were killed in the Poltava region. 6 apartment blocks, 2 private homes, a shop, non-residential buildings, and an industrial facility in Zaporizhia were also damaged, the regional governor said. The attack came as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warned on Monday of an imminent large-scale Russian strike, citing Ukrainian intelligence. Volodymyr Zelensky says there is, quote, irrefutable evidence that Russia is providing intelligence support to Iran, warning the activity could prolong the conflict in the Middle East and further destabilize the region.
Main Intelligence Directorate. Report on the situation around Iran. There is growing evidence that the Russians continue to provide the Iranian regime with intelligence support. This is clearly destructive activity and must be stopped, as it only leads to further destabilization. All responsible states are interested in ensuring security and preventing bigger problems. Markets are already reacting negatively, and this is significantly complicating the fuel situation in many countries. By helping the Iranian regime survive and strike more accurately, Russia is effectively prolonging the war. There must be a response.
In other news, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told state media that the country will never change its status as a nuclear-armed state and will treat South Korea as its most hostile opponent. Kim said Pyongyang's nuclear status was irreversible and that expanding a, quote, self-defensive nuclear deterrent was essential to national security, regional stability, and economic development. Kim rejected the idea that nuclear disarmament could be exchanged for economic benefits or security guarantees. A military transport plane crashed in Colombia shortly after takeoff, leaving dozens dead and many more injured. 114 Army personnel were on board, as well as 11 crew members. Authorities have launched a full investigation.
At least 66 people were killed and 77 injured after a Colombian military transport plane crashed during takeoff near Puerto Leguizamo on the border with Peru on Monday. The aircraft, a Lockheed C-130 Hercules operated by the Colombian Air Force, went down as it was leaving the runway. Officials say the plane likely struck something near the end of the runway before one of its wings hit a tree as it lost height. The aircraft then caught fire with reports of explosions on board, worsening the impact of the crash.
Unfortunately, we had an air accident at 9:50 in Puerto Leguizamo, Putumayo. It involved a Colombian Aerospace Force Hercules C-130, registration number 1016. It was covering the Puerto Leguizamo to Puerto Asis route, transporting soldiers from our national army.
Military sources say there were 128 people on board, including 11 Air Force members, 115 Army personnel, and 2 national police officers. Though authorities report that 4 people remain missing and are still working to confirm the exact figures. All care protocols for the victims and their families have been activated, as well as the corresponding investigation. Local residents were first to reach the remote crash site, helping to pull out survivors and transporting the injured on motorcycles. Emergency crews arrived later, but access to the area has made rescue efforts more difficult.
The plane took off, and when we looked, it turned around here and started to descend. So I said, "Man, it looks like the plane is going to crash." When we looked, we felt the impact, and I said, "Man, that plane crashed." It's very sad, truly heartbreaking, because it affects not only this municipality but all of Colombia, the families and the children who may be serving in the security forces. So my deepest condolences go out to them. It really is sad.
President Gustavo Petro has separately criticized bureaucratic delays affecting plans to modernize the military, though it is not yet clear whether that is linked to the crash. The crash is considered one of the deadliest involving Colombia's military in recent years, and an investigation is now underway to establish the exact cause.
We're going for a short break now, and when we return, we'll take a closer look at the latest developments surrounding the Russia-Ukraine war. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. As the Iran war captures global headlines, spring at the east of Europe brought renewed offensives and counteroffensives in the Russia-Ukraine war. According to an assessment by the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War, Russia's spring-summer offensive is underway. There are reports that the disabling of the Starlink system for Russian troops cut off communications with the front line, helping Ukraine mount a lightning-fast counteroffensive, giving Kyiv a surprise trump card in the negotiations. Joining us to talk on the latest is Maria Dmitrievka-Penyak, President of the Ukrainian Congress Committee, Illinois Division, coming to us from Chicago. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Maria. Let's start with what's happening on the ground. How have these improved weather conditions changed the situation?
Thank you so much for having me on the air again. For the counteroffensive, I am not sure at this point that this could be called as such. Russia endures heavy losses on the ground. By estimates, about 7,000 to 8,000 troops have been killed, injured, and basically casualties in the past 5 days. So you should understand that any movements could be now detected with the newer technology. It's no longer direct contact line. It is monitored by drones, by AI technology, AI-powered technology. So anyone in the attacking position is exposing themselves even more than it used to be in the first days of war. So therefore, Russians should be prepared for even heavier casualties. I have my own sources on the ground in that battlefield, and just over the weekend, Friday, near Liman, our Ukrainian battalion destroyed, drone battalion, destroyed heavily armored vehicles and personnel, and there's 2 tanks in that group of attacking force. So without any losses to Ukrainians. So how is the counteroffensive going? Hopefully it's going to continue be going this way with the major Russian losses and no losses from the Ukrainian side.
In all these contacts you have, both on the ground in Ukraine, but also in the U.S., what's the general sentiment regarding the state of the war now that a different conflict, the one in the Middle East, has basically taken the spotlight?
Overall, of course, this is not to the advantage of the negotiating process that Moise talked about Iran war and that took over major headlines. However, there's also a silver lining to that, and that is Russia aligning themselves openly with Iran and supporting Iran with intelligence, with probably weapons and Shaheeds, and the newest anti-drone technology. So this is something that is openly talked about. This is proven. Russia even mentioned that in their reports. Iran is mentioning that Russia is their ally, and Russia is positioning themselves as the enemy once again of the United States. So this is something that should be talked about over and over again. As I mentioned, this is something that is to the advantage of Ukraine in this big war. Other than that, another silver lining is Ukraine having a technology that now in high demand in this war, in this conflict. As we know, the advanced technology that is able to attack with drones and counteract those attacks are available in two countries. One is Russia and another one is Ukraine. So since Russia is openly positioning themselves anti-West, the rest of the world has really turned to Ukraine to ask for sharing the intelligence, for sharing the technologies.
Well, in that vein, Ukraine's president earlier said that more than 200 Ukrainian drone specialists have been deployed to 5, I believe, Middle Eastern countries to help counter Iranian drones. How much is that helping Kyiv's position in any future peace talks?
It definitely is, as we call a card now, since politics became very transactional. Ukraine has a lot to offer. It is not just about technology, it is about the expertise, how to use that technology. And that is also something that no one else has in the world, no one else for the Russian or Iranians, because as we know, Iran has been involved with the war in Ukraine since day one. So Iran has the same technology as Russia does, and Ukraine has the technology to counteract the drones and then everything else that's being fought in the modern war. So Ukrainian position has strengthened. A lot of countries, and I don't remember exact number, but I think that also made a news, and the President Zelensky also mentioned how many countries have reached out to Ukraine asking for the technology, for the expertise. So Ukraine is a major player. There's no doubt in that. And that will continue to be as Ukrainians have a technology and the expertise to use it.
Now, on the diplomatic side of things, we saw Ukrainian officials meet their U.S. Counterparts at the weekend in Florida. Both sides described the talks as constructive. What is Kyiv's priority right now in talks with the Americans?
Of course, Kyiv's priorities, as it always has been, to end the war and to bring peace, but not to bring peace at the expense of freedom. We are for Kyiv and all the free people are for peace and for freedom that it will last. The interesting point that is kind of underlooked is that Russia openly sort of threatened United States with positioning themselves that they will continue to provide intelligence to Iran unless United States holds providing intelligence to Ukraine, which is really a threat to United States. And as we know, that proposal was rejected, but it also shows the true face of Russia once again, that they are not ready to negotiate. They want to keep being a major player despite draining their resources, their troops, their supplies, and they are being a paper tiger once again and making empty threats.
There's of course also the matter of funding. Hungary is blocking an already agreed vital EU loan for Ukraine. As things stand now, how long can Kyiv keep up the fight without those funds?
That is also something that is on the front line news right now. Orban is not doing too well, as we know. He's struggling to win re-election. I strongly believe that Hungarian people see him for what he is. We heard there are even plans to stage an assassination attack to boost the emotional component as economical component in him trying to win election is not going well. European countries are openly criticizing Orban for his position aligning himself with Putin. And we even know, and again, those are confirmed reports that from the European Council, Security Council, Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs reports directly to Lavrov, which basically having Russia at the table there. So this association, Orban and Putin, hopefully is not going to go well for Orban, and eventually that aid will be released under pressure. And Orban should remember that it never ends well for the dictators. So hopefully the common sense will prevail at some point. However, of course, it's a lot of money that being held, but we also see a lot of private companies, defense companies from all over the world investing in Ukraine, working with Ukrainian technology companies to, again, this is not just to the benefit of Ukraine, but to the benefit of country that are investing. So through the private funds, there's still a lot of investment going on, and that is showing results on the battlefield.
And Maria, now that you mentioned that, we all remember the big deal. It was the minerals deal with the US and the establishment of the fund and so on. There are reports that some investments are coming. How important are investments in the near future to shore up support from allied either countries or like-minded people in those countries?
Investments are important because it's not just about money, it's about creating jobs, it's about buying equipment. And so anyone that invests in that infrastructure wants to protect their investment. So investments from other countries always come with a strings attached. And we all know what happens to companies that investing in Russia. Russia can confiscate their companies at any time or block their deals or hold them hostage. So Ukraine is rich in minerals. The deal has been reached. All we're waiting right now is peace. And we're really hoping that US can step up in the negotiating process. As we remember, and I was just analyzing this for myself today, during election campaign, President Trump said many times that he will end the war on day one by bringing Putin to the table. And he also said that if Putin refuses to negotiate, he will give Ukraine everything Ukraine needs to win the war. That is yet to happen. So we have to be reminding the world that that was said, and then Ukraine must win in this war, as Ukraine is staying on the right side of history. Ukraine is a democratic country. Ukraine is spreading innovations and frankly speaking, wealth around the world by being a winner in this war.
Well, Maria, thank you kindly for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, after a short break, we will be taking a look at the major stories out of the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching A News. There are new reports suggesting that Turkey may be playing a mediation role in efforts to end the ongoing war between Iran, Israel, and the United States. While Ankara has not officially confirmed the claims, diplomatic contacts appear to be intensifying. Adam Morrow has the latest in Istanbul.
U.S. news portal Axios and Israel's Channel 12 reported on Monday that Turkey, along with Egypt and Pakistan, is currently acting as mediator between Iran and the United States. The reports suggested that the three countries were working behind the scenes to help de-escalate the ongoing regional conflict. Ankara, however, has not officially confirmed the claims. Tehran, for its part, has firmly denied that any negotiations, in any form, are currently taking place. Nevertheless, for the past several days, Turkey has engaged in intense diplomatic activity. On Monday, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with ambassadors from Gulf Cooperation Council countries and Jordan to discuss the escalating regional situation. Details of the closed-door meeting in Ankara were not immediately made public. But according to diplomatic sources, the talks focused on ways to contain the conflict and prevent further regional spillover. A day earlier, Fidan held a series of phone calls with key international and regional figures. In separate calls, Fidan spoke with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, and U.S. officials. The discussions reportedly centered on possible diplomatic steps to end the fighting, which continued to rage in the early hours of Tuesday. Turkey has stepped up its diplomatic outreach in recent days as the conflict has continued to mount. Officials say Ankara is maintaining contact with both Western and regional actors while pushing for negotiations aimed at reducing tensions. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
An official of the U.S. State Department is visiting Georgia for talks with officials, entrepreneurs, and the civil society. For more on the visit, coming at a time of uncertainty in bilateral relations, we go to Tbilisi and our Nini Nikolaishvili.
State Department official Peter Andrioli is in Georgia, where he is holding meetings with government officials, the private sector, and local stakeholders. A key part of the visit is a trip to the port of Poti, one of Georgia's most important flexi ports and a central hub for regional trade. The visit highlights continued U.S. interest in Georgia's transport and logistics infrastructure. This comes at a time when high-level engagement between Tbilisi and Washington has slowed in recent years. Against that backdrop, attention to strategic sites like Poti carries added importance for the Georgian government, which has been seeking to maintain strong ties with its Western partners. Georgia is positioning itself as a transit hub along the so-called Middle Corridor connecting Europe and Asia. In this context, port infrastructure is a key priority. A notable parallel is the Anaklia Deep-Sea Port project, a major component of that vision. The development tender was awarded to a Chinese company, China Communications Construction Company, a decision that drew attention in Washington amid broader concerns over growing Chinese influence in the Black Sea region. While Anaklia is not the focus of the visit, it remains part of the broader strategic picture shaping Georgia's partnerships. During the trip, Andrioli is also expected to visit the administrative boundary line, underlining ongoing U.S. interest in security issues. Overall, the visit signals that despite political challenges, Georgia remains an important partner for the United States, especially when it comes to regional connectivity, infrastructure, and stability. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Another shipment of cargo was sent to Armenia via Azerbaijan. 4 wagons of fertilizer and 1 wagon of buckwheat departed from the Bilajari railway station, operated by Azerbaijan Railways. The total weight of the shipped products was more than 300 tons. The train will next pass through Georgia before continuing towards Armenia. These shipments follow Baku's decision to lift long-standing restrictions on cargo transit to Armenia. To date, more than 23,000 tons of grain and more than 700 tons of fertilizer have been transported to Armenia through Azerbaijani territory. There are renewed calls for girls' education to be restored in Afghanistan as a new school year begins with millions still excluded from classrooms. International officials warn the ongoing restrictions could have long-term consequences for the country's development. A News' Tamim Bahiz has the details in Kabul.
The UK Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Richard Lindsay, says millions of Afghan girls will once again be denied their right to education at the start of the academic year. In a message marking the reopening of schools, he warned that excluding women and girls from education harms the country's future and hinders progress in every Afghan community. He stressed that education must be available to all. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan, Richard Bennett, echoed those concerns, saying the academic year has begun while girls are still not allowed to pursue education beyond the 6th grade or attend universities. He described the situation as difficult for Afghan women and expressed hope that they will be permitted to return to schools and higher education. The Afghan government has not yet commented on the recent remarks. The restrictions on girls' education and women's employment have been in place since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. Despite repeated international appeals, there is still no indication the bans will be lifted, leaving millions of girls unable to continue their studies. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
After a short break, we'll be taking a closer look at the possibility of regional powers mediating to end the war in Iran. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Now, with conflicting narratives coming from Washington and Tehran on talks on ending the war between the US and Israel on one side and Iran on the other, 3 regional powers are reportedly trying to mediate. To talk on the efforts by Ankara, Cairo, and Islamabad to bring the conflict to an end, we're joined by former US diplomat Matthew Bryza, coming to us from Istanbul. Welcome, Matthew. Always a pleasure to have you on the program. Could you please walk us through how each of these capitals might contribute? What are their specific diplomatic strengths?
Well, I mean, first of all, Turkey has a very strong proven track record on mediation. The Russia-Ukraine grain deal was brokered by President Erdogan and the United Nations. In Israel-Gaza, Turkey also played a crucial role way back when, in late 2023, in the freeing of 20 Thai hostages that the world didn't really hear about, but that Turkey made happen through its long-standing relationship with Hamas. That relationship had been a thorn in the side of Washington and of Jerusalem for years, but Turkey was able to use it and secure those releases. So Turkey has a proven record in dealing in a conflict with Israel, in at least helping the United States reduce tensions, and in this case, get hostages released. Also, in October of last year, after the President Trump's 20-point plan was agreed by Israel, President Trump gave Erdogan tremendous credit for helping to bring Hamas to the table there and again secure the release of hostages. So Turkey has a long-standing experience in mediation. Islamabad has not been so active in mediating conflicts. I mean, it's been locked in a conflict with India that it gave President Trump credit for helping to mediate, even though Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, didn't give Trump that credit. But that moment of the U.S. mediating between Pakistan and India established Pakistan as a special partner in President Trump's mind. So then Pakistan brings that sort of good spirit and trust from President Trump. As far as others are concerned, I mean, yeah, Cairo has been wanting to get involved. Doha has as well. And they both have been involved in conflict mediation, of course, with regard to Gaza in the past. And Saudi Arabia has wanted to be involved as well. I mean, I've even heard reports that Azerbaijan's government and even Turkmenistan's government have been facilitating the passage of messages to try to de-escalate tensions now with Iran. But the most promising one, I think, as far as the mediators go right now, is definitely Turkey.
We've heard from President Donald Trump that there are now some major points of agreement with Iran. Tehran is denying any talks are taking place. But is it likely that these discussions are indeed underway via these mediators?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, I think, yes, it's almost certain that messages are being passed by these various mediators, but that there are no direct talks, it seems, between Tehran and Washington. Yeah, you're right. You cited President Trump's curious statement yesterday that the United States is working directly with, he said, the top guy in Iran's government, wouldn't say who it was. If he knows who the top guy in Iran's government is, he's the only one who does, because, I mean, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, seems to have the lion's share of the power now. Maybe he means the Speaker of Iran's parliament, but the Speaker came out publicly today and said, no, we're having no direct talks with the United States government. I think President Trump is playing for time. Either time to get out of the box he put himself in on Saturday when he said, we give Iran 48 hours essentially to agree to peace on our terms, or we will start bombing its electricity infrastructure. That was never going to work. So he's given some more time to himself. He's saying, okay, we have 5 days to now negotiate. I think he's hoping that somehow he'll be able to negotiate some way forward. But I don't see any sign that the Iranians are ready to stop fighting. They feel that they are in the driver's seat because all they have to do is to survive, to win. Whereas President Trump has to either destroy the entire Iranian regime or somehow use military force in a way that I think is impossible to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So the Iranians know their buy-in is needed to open the Strait of Hormuz.
There are reports that peace talks might be likely this week between the U.S. and Iran, and that Pakistan is set to host those. Islamabad came out saying they're ready to facilitate talks. What do you make of that possible venue and the reported lineup of the American side? According to various U.S. outlets, Vice President J.D. Vance is also supposed to be there.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. A few days ago, Islamabad, or the government of Pakistan, did say that they would be willing to host such talks between U.S. and Iranian officials. But again, so far the Iranians are saying, also the foreign minister, no, we're not ready to talk with the United States, which, by the way, is what President Trump was saying just last Friday and Saturday when he said, no, we have no interest in talking to the Iranians because we're destroying so much of them. We're on the offensive. We're winning. So why would we talk? So who knows what's in President Trump's mind. But as for the lineup, yes, so Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and then Steve Witkoff, this president's envoy for a number of mediations, will be participating. But you're right, this time with J.D. Vance as well. It's not clear why that is. Neither Witkoff nor Kushner have any experience previously, other than now in the Trump administration, in these high-stakes negotiations, international negotiations. Well, other than Kushner, who did play a key role, to be fair, in negotiating the Abraham Accords. But Kushner and Witkoff have not had any success, be it in negotiating between Russia and Ukraine or Iran, with Iran. And we'll recall that on February 28th, when the U.S. attacked, when the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, Kushner and Witkoff were conducting negotiations that, again, they didn't succeed. So it could be that President Trump has decided, okay, I want a higher level authority, the vice president, to be involved. But J.D. Vance, although he's a very smart man, also has absolutely no diplomatic experience negotiating. So I for the life of me, I can't understand why there isn't the Secretary of State participating, somebody who does know something about foreign policy, and why there aren't professional diplomats and intelligence officers and people who really understand conflicts and Iran and international security. But apparently, President Trump doesn't think they're needed.
Yeah, he does have his signature style, doesn't he?
He does.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on the optics of everything here. What could a diplomatic victory look like for Washington on one side and for Tehran on the other?
Yeah, so there's what I think ultimately will be the victory will be both sides will claim victory, and the government in Tehran will simply survive physically, because so many of its top leaders have been killed, but also politically. And maybe a slightly different form, And the Iranian government will then, it will claim what the world's strongest, in history, strongest military power couldn't defeat us, not even combined with a nuclear power that's the strongest military in the Middle East, because we are so mighty and because God is on our side. I think that's what a victory will look like for Iran, though Iran's demands right now are much beyond that. They're calling for an immediate ceasefire, which is reasonable, but they're also calling for some sort of guarantees that would make sure that the U.S. and Israel could never attack Iran again. It's not clear what they mean, but they mean something involving, I think, the international community and maybe the United Nations. And then they're demanding compensation for the tens of billions of dollars in damage inflicted on their country and their economy by the U.S. and Israeli attacks. I think there's no chance the United States will ever agree to compensation, but it's possible the U.S. could agree to lifting sanctions or lifting part of the sanctions on Iran to give the Iranian economy some of the economic and financial oxygen it needs. Were that to happen, Iran could definitely claim that's a victory. The United States will define victory any way President Trump wishes, no matter what happens. But I think the bare minimum would be that the Strait of Hormuz is available for shipments of oil, natural gas, fertilizers, and all products, such that global commodities markets then can stabilize. Yeah, beyond that, I don't think there's any chance that, or much chance that the United States, together with Israel, will be able to eliminate completely the Iranian regime, such as it is. So I think both sides are going to have to moderate their maximalist demands right now, but I think they're likely to claim victory the way I just outlined.
And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this. Of course, there's another warring party here. It's Israel. Do you believe the United States will exert enough pressure on Tel Aviv not to derail peace talks in any way?
Well, I can't predict the future with any accuracy, but I can definitely observe the past. And the answer to that question has been no, definitely not. Ever since, Israel responded to the horrific massacres and murders of October 7th and attacked Gaza so brutally, the United States had the ability to pull back on the military assistance it was providing Israel to compel Israel to be less brutal on the civilian population, and it did nothing. In this war, remarkably, Secretary of State Rubio said about 3 weeks ago that the reason the United States attacked Iran is because the United States knew that Israel was going to attack Iran, and that would inevitably lead to a retaliation by Iran against U.S. military camps and forces in the Gulf region. So the U.S. struck Iran before it could strike to minimize damage to the U.S. forces. That's a remarkable admission that Israel pulled the U.S. into this war. Now Washington says that that's not correct, that Rubio was speaking incorrectly. I sure hope so. But even the suggestion that maybe President Trump would have followed Prime Minister's lead to get into the Iran war is a powerful suggestion that the United States has not exerted any pressure on Israel to stop its attacks or to moderate them. One more point is that it seems clear that Israel killed Larijani, the former national security advisor, who, as credible reports from Washington have shown, was the person that the Trump administration was holding discreet negotiations with on how to end the war. So Israel was able to derail, up until now, any efforts the U.S. has had toward a peace negotiation. What happens next? That's everyone's guess.
Everyone's guess it is. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insight.
Nice to be with you.
And thank you very much for watching. That's all we have for you for now, but stay tuned to A News.